Okay, I am going to start. It is exactly 1:30. Definitely make sure your microphones are muted, otherwise we'll hear what you say. So I just wanted to introduce myself. I am Kelly Allsup. I serve the counties of Livingston, McLean, and Woodford. I have an amazing group of volunteers I work with. And I wanted to do this butterfly identification presentation because of my passion for entomology. So, identifying butterflies can be somewhat difficult because they fly around and don't stay still. So this is like the next slide is the perfect butterfly for us to identify. This was a very cool Lego sculpture of a monarch on milkweed that we found in South Carolina, and very, could be easy to identify because it's not flying away and it's holding still. But so that's why when I tell you about a particular butterfly, I'm going to give you, tips on not only the identification, but maybe how they fly or where they'll be, and that might lead you to proper identification. So I say, what beautiful setae you have. Well, these are, scales on the wings, and they're not setae, but these scales, they yield these gorgeous patterns. But they also have another function. They allow for escape from predators, so they're easily removed, and you can definitely rub these off, and that's something that people always say, if you rub off scales on a butterfly, it'll die, and that is not true because that's one of the ways that they escape their predators. But actually, setae are little hairs all over the butterfly's body that allows it to sense the environment. So it can hear sound through these little hairs, it can feel the environment, and so that's really how it is communicating and reading its environment, is through little hairs all over its body. We know that the butterflies have a proboscis, and that is one of the cool ways because they're drinking up nectar. I think all of us may have led a junior master gardener program where we drink lemonade through straws to demonstrate to the kids how a proboscis works. And when you see a butterfly actually using its proboscis, it's really quite fascinating. Another really fascinating thing that you may see are Puddle Clubs, and these are males, and what they're doing is they're getting nutrients from the mud, from the moist ground. Some entomologists actually believe that this is perhaps a way to attract females. So if you ever find a puddle club, count yourself lucky. And most of the time they'll be males, and most of the time they're all the same species. But in this picture, you actually see, swallowtails with different kinds of swallowtails. There are 5 butterfly families. Most of the ones that you actually want to talk about are the brush-footed, the very pretty, elaborate ones. But we also are going to talk about swallowtails today, and then some of the ones in the white family. I did have to include one skipper, and the skippers are a subfamily, and the biggest difference between them and other butterflies is that they have sort of an enlarged round head, and if you look closely at the end of their antenna, they have little hooks. So So it was really quite hard for me to pick out what butterflies I was going to talk about today. So how I did it was I went to the Illinois Butterfly Monitoring Network, and I chose the highest number of sightings of butterflies. And these are the ones that had a recorded highest number from this report by the Illinois Butterfly Monitoring Network. So that's how I chose the butterflies I chose. I did want to just touch on the Carner blue, which is an endangered species. This butterfly, you can still probably see some of them in Wisconsin or Indiana or even Ohio or Michigan. But what their issue is they're from, sand prairies, oak savannas. And so it's obviously habitat destruction is why they are so endangered, but it's probably the lack of fire that used to dominate this area. And so shrubs are actually growing in the place of the lupine that these butterflies need to rear their larvae on. I'm just going to jump right into black swallowtail. These are large, they're black, they're shiny. They really have cool, lazy back and forth movement. They're actually sexually dimorphic, which means the male and the female look different from each other. So you see here, the female has less yellow dots and more blue scaling than the male. So we see the female is on the left because she has a lot more blue scaling and less yellow dots than the one on the right. They also, black swallowtails, have this characteristic orange spot surrounded by blue. Really unique. And then another thing about the black swallowtail is it mimics another swallowtail, the Pipevine Swallowtail. And you'll notice a lot of these other types of swallowtails will mimic the pipevine because the Pipevine Swallowtail is poisonous. And so the Pipevine Swallowtail is the model and they are the mimic. And we'll go to the next slide to look at the underneath of a black swallowtail, because this is probably how you're going to actually see them, because they don't always have their wings open. And you see right here, they do sometimes fan their wings open when they are feeding, but this is what you'll most likely see. And we see that the orange actually replaces the yellow on the underside. And they also have this tail. Entomologists again believe that this tail has a purpose and that it's mimicking the antenna. So if a bird were to take a piece out, it would go for the tail of the wings rather than the actual head. Again, the orange replaces the yellow on the underside, and you see it has that bright, vivid orange and those white spots. And then the abdomen has a row of yellow spots. Many of you have probably raised many of these black swallowtails, their caterpillars, unknowingly, because they feed on parsley and dill and carrots. And in fact, what we found at some of our gardens here in Bloomington is that they prefer the curly parsley to the flat leaf. However, I've seen them on both. I've seen them on carrots. And so they like that carrot family. Well, what they do is if you actually go and squeeze them, okay, just poke them, they will send out this orange forked gland called an osmeteria. and it stinks. It smells bad. So it's supposed to scare you away with the scent. And they also like to headbutt a little bit. So I love playing with these around kids. Kids are really quite fascinated when they see the orange osmeteria come out. And I just place them back on the plant and they're fine. So I do have more descriptions, but I'll pass through these slides. I just wanted you guys to have some of the information. Pipevine Swallowtail. Okay, here we go. Here is the model for what most of these swallowtails are mimicking. And this one actually has, you know, this kind of velvety black appearance, and it kind of flashes bright in the sun. They are rapid flyers, but they have low fluttering wing beats. On here, again, they're sexually dimorphic. So the male is the one on the left, and he has more blue iridescence than the female. And then they both have these little white markings on the edge of their wings. Here we see the side, the closed view of a Pipevine Swallowtail. And this one has the 7 orange dots on the underside. And then again, you'll see more of the blue iridescence on the underside with the male. This one is dependent on a particular type of plant. We know that most butterflies like nectar, and their caterpillars are usually dependent on 1 or 2 species of plants. And here is a Dutchman's pipe, and this is growing at an heirloom garden here in Bloomington at the David Davis Mansion called Sarah's Garden. And this was something that Sarah would have grown back 100 years ago. So this plant is very vital to the Pipevine Swallowtail, which may be why this one did not make the Illinois Monitoring Network list. And this is possibly why, because of its particular need for this plant for the larva. More information. Tiger swallowtail. This is the one that we see everywhere. The big, huge wings. 5 inches. It's a pretty large butterfly. Bright yellow. They always have these black tiger marks with a black edging with yellow dots on the wing edge. The males have less blue scaling than the females, so this is the exact opposite of the pipevine. So here we see those yellow dots along the side, and here we'll see both of these are females. Now notice the one on the left, she has those big, bright, bold yellow wings, and then you see at the bottom of her hind wings she has the blue scaling. Well, on the other side we see a tiger swallowtail that has really mimicked the Pipevine Swallowtail, so she can actually come out in black forms and yellow forms. The males cannot change the way they look because they have to attract their mates, so the male will always be yellow, but the female could be yellow or black. So it's not, I can look at here and I can tell it's not a Pipevine Swallowtail because of the blue scaling, the extensive blue scaling. And then I know that it's not a Spicebush Swallowtail, which is coming up later, because it doesn't have these blue-green chevrons on it, and you'll see those later. And again, the females have this blue scaling. Here's a picture that we took, I took, at an insect Bioblitz. This was a 4-H project that was put together in the 1950s, and so it was donated to, this project was donated to the master naturalist, and so we were able to see what insects were in McLean County almost 70 years ago. And so we have all the forms here. We have the female, the black female, and actually the technical term is called Glaucus. Then we have the yellow female, the technical term is called Turnus. And notice that she has more blue scaling than the male. She also is a bit bigger than the male. And it can be, you know, kind of hard to see in this picture, but I know this is a swallowtail because you can even sometimes see that tiger mark on the underside of the wings when they're closed. It's such a beautiful blue iridescence. And again, here's some more information on the tiger swallowtail that I included in. Here's the Spicebush Swallowtail. Again, it's a black butterfly, has markings, can be somewhat confused, but the Spicebush Swallowtail, they're 3 to 5 inches. The adults usually fly close to the ground and bound from flower to flower. This one is more prevalent in the southern 2/3 of the state. This one did not make the list, but I had to put this one on here, and you'll see why, because I call the Spicebush Swallowtail the great mimicker, because it mimics something throughout its entire life cycle. So how I would identify this is, again, the butterflies are sexually dimorphic, and the male has more green and the female has more blue on the hind wings. But they both share these, and then they both have these yellow dots. These, they both share these green chevrons on the outer edge. And it could be just knowing that green chevrons on the Spicebush Swallowtail can get you to identify this insect. Another thing that they have these yellow dots that you, on the upper part of the hind wing, that you won't find on other butterflies. And on the underside, they usually have these 2 rows of orange dots, and then after the 4th orange dot, it will be interrupted by iridescence. And this will be a great way for you to identify this insect. Hold on just one moment. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Here we see a Spicebush Swallowtail enjoying some petunias. I can tell it's a Spicebush Swallowtail because I actually see those chevrons. And then I see that 4th orange spot is interrupted by iridescence. Here's why I call them the great mimickers, because in their early instars, which means they're going to molt several times as a caterpillar, they look a little bit like bird poop. And what bird would want to eat poop? So, what a great way to disguise yourself. As they get older, they actually look a bit like a green snake. And that will be the tail end. Actually, the head will be on the other side. Now, caterpillars can't see really well. They can sometimes see form, but they don't have the compound eyes that the adults have. So, obviously, these are not eyes. These are called eye spots, though. And looks pretty menacing, right? And then the other form would be the pupa, and it looks like a dead leaf. And again, the adult mimics the Pipevine Swallowtail. Spicebush Swallowtail caterpillars thrive on particular species of plants, and clearly Spicebush is one of them since it's in there. And then we also have sassafras. And you know, sometimes these aren't commonly used in the landscape, so if you could put some of these in, then they might do much better. We might see more of them in the reporting. Again, these are, you know, primarily grown in the southern part of Illinois. Red spotted purple. Such a beautiful, beautiful iridescent black, 4 inches. It really is a relaxed flyer. It actually goes less for flowers and more for stuff like sap, tree sap, carrion, which means dead animals, dung, which means animal poop, and rotted fruit. So again, that iridescent blue and black, and then when it actually is at rest is when you can truly identify it, even though no other butterfly really looks like that, but it can be somewhat confusing with, you know, the black swallowtails, even though it's lacking a tail. But if you look at the next picture, where it's at rest, you have all these orange spots along the edge, and then what you really need to pay attention to is that there's orange spots along the body, and that will tell you right away that this is a red spotted purple. The picture on the left is a little tiny red spotted purple caterpillar. And I first read about this in the Doug Tallamy book in Bringing Home Nature. And what this little caterpillar does is it uses silk and its frass, which is insect poop, to build a little bridge. So in between eating, it will crawl out onto the little bridge, and that will protect it from ants. And so these ants will not cross this stick made of poo, frass. So what a great way, if you don't have anything to defend yourself, why not use your poo and your silk? Such a great way for it to survive in our environment. Another really cool thing is the larva is actually the larva of red spotted purple over winter here in Illinois. And they do it in what we call a hibernaculum, which is kind of a rolled up leaf. And then they'll stay in there all winter long, and then they'll complete their life cycle the next spring. Red Admiral. This is one of the first butterflies that you will see in the spring. And in fact, I think like the first or second year I was in this job, we had this amazing population of them. They were everywhere. They were all over the lilacs and on any of the spring bloomers. So it was a really cool sight. So these are a little bit smaller. They're about 1.5 to 3 inches. They have brown, black, and then they have these fiery orange bars down the top wing and the hind wing. And on the tips of the wings, it's black with white spots. The males of this species actually stays active at night, and they are rapid, erratic flyers. On the underside, they kind of mottled gray. You know, the hind wing looks kind of like bark. You do see a little bit of that orange and that iridescent blue and white. The caterpillar of the red admiral is dependent on nettles. Now you say, really, nettles, Kelly? Yes, nettles. Even though they have been introduced, this is how the caterpillars have survived, is eating something like slender nettle. So another reason to have weeds in your garden. Morning cloak, another common visitor. This one is 2.5 to almost 4 inches. Not quite as big as that yellow swallowtail, but pretty big. It has this rich maroon, brown, black, velvety appearance with this yellow gold margin lined with blue spots. And it's kind of hard to confuse this with something else because you get the rich maroon and the yellow gold. And then another thing, this one flies in a series of quick beats followed by a glide. The adults usually emerge in June and July. So timing may have something where you, in June and July, you're out in the garden, you're looking at different butterflies, this one may appear. On the other side, it looks like bark, actual bark striations. It's really quite intricate and beautiful. Again, another great way for a butterfly to blend in with the environment by using their wings. This is a cute butterfly. It's called the Great Spangled Fritillaria. Despite its name, it is still only about 3 or 4 inches. It's a very calm butterfly. You could actually creep up on this one and take a picture of it. It has these orange, black, this orange with black bars in the middle. Then you'll actually see these little crescents and these little spots all over it. This is really a prairie species. That is, you might see more in the northern half of the state. But what gives it its name? What gives it its name are these 2 rows of silvery spots that spangle in the that shine and look like spangles in the sun. And then if you look, it just has this normal kind of buff colored underneath. Now the larva of this butterfly survives on violets. Yet another reason to let violets take over your lawn, because you'd be supporting the caterpillars of this butterfly. Question mark and comma were not on the list. I'm sorry, I had to add them because they're such unique looking butterflies. And they too are not going to be the ones pollinating your flowers or drinking nectar. They're going to go for mud or rotting fruit or tree sap or carrion. But they have these really cool kind of squared off wings. The question mark has this horizontal dash on the top. And then they have seasonal variations, which in the summer, you see, it's a little bit darker than in the winter, where it actually is much brighter orange. And then they have this kind of violet on the edge of the wings. And then if you compare the tails, the tail is a little bit longer in the winter. So if you ever saw an orange and black squared off butterfly with violet edging, you know you're seeing the winter form of a question mark. So there's that violet. And then again, the reason it gets the name is because it looks like a dead leaf on the underneath. Perhaps might be hard to tell these, because one of the things that the males do is they perch on a tree head down, again making them really look like a leaf on a tree. But if you look closely at the little silver crescent with the dot, it resembles a question mark. And again, that little spot is how you tell the difference from the comma. Here we have the comma again. One of the ways to differentiate it from the question mark is if you look at the first arrow, it's got some yellow chevron types of forms in there, and it doesn't have that black horizontal spot. And then look again at the tail. It doesn't quite have as long of a tail as the question mark does. And then you look at the underside of while it is at rest, and you don't see the dot, but all you see is the little crescent. Oh, the pearl crescents. These are really small, but very cute butterflies. They kind of dart from flower to flower, closer to the ground. If we go to the next picture, clearly this makes them look big, but we had to do a close-up. Again, these are sexually dimorphic. If you notice the difference between the male and the male has a dark body and the female has an orange body. Now, they one of the distinguishing characteristics, because a lot of butterflies, there's other in this family that have this orange black bars and crescents, is that the outer edge is interrupted by a yellow sort of chevron crescent. And that would tell you right away that you have a pearl crescent. Here's the underside of the pearl crescent. It has that white crescent on the outer margin, which can be really quite striking against the buff and the orange. Now, pearl crescents, their larvae are dependent on asters. So if you think that this is a cute, pretty butterfly, then asters is a great plant to plant in the garden. Not to mention, asters are great for adult butterflies and bees and everything else. So again, they dart from flower to flower. Painted lady. Now, the painted lady, she is he. They fly to the south for the winter. They migrate the way monarchs do. They're a smaller butterfly, 2 to 2.5 inches, but they have like an erratic flight, so they kind of look confused when they're flying around in the garden. They have this orange and black mottled with these black tips and the white spots. Again, you couldn't mistake this for a red admiral, because it actually doesn't have that red fiery orange bar. And then you couldn't mistake it for the red admiral because of when it sits like this, when it has its wings closed, you actually see these 4 yellow rimmed spots. And that will tell you right away that you have a painted lady. If you have an American lady, you only have 2. Now, painted ladies are a very social butterfly. They'll actually land on people, which actually makes them wonderful to work with kids. And any kid who's raised butterflies in a program most likely are working with painted ladies. So here I wanted to show a picture. If we look at this coneflower with this, what looks like a painted lady on the bottom, I know it's not a painted lady because it is lacking those 4 eye spots, but rather it is in red admirable. Here is the cups that we can order off the internet, and we teach the kids about butterflies. You take them in, these tiny, tiny little black spiky caterpillars. They like to eat in groups, and they spin the silk around on themselves. A lot of kids always ask me why they're making webs, but it's actually silk. In nature, they eat thistles and hollyhock and mallow, but they can, again, thrive on this man-made food source right here. Common Buckeye. One of the main things that people tell me when they see a common Buckeye is it's smaller than they imagined. And I've actually seen them like crazy lately all over, you know, all of the blooming flowers right now. Obviously it's those eye spots that get you. They're so vivid and bright. One of the ways that you know you have a Buckeye, aside from the eye spots, is you always have these 2 orange bars at the top. And then you'll have that eye spot. And if you look closely, it looks kind of like that eye spot is in a white or yellowish 6. And so that right there will tell you, you know, you have a common Buckeye. This one also flies south, and another way that it acts is sometimes when it's disturbed, it'll fly away, but it'll come right back to the same spot. On the other side, not quite as brilliant and vivid, kind of tan with these really, really small eye spots on the underside. Now, common Buckeye, the caterpillars feed on common plantain. Yes, the stuff you have in your lawn that you don't like. Well, yet another reason maybe to have a few weeds in the lawn. Another thing that these caterpillars will eat on is snapdragons, sunflowers, and foxglove. So yeah, not all butterflies, butterfly caterpillars eat native plants. Some of them have adapted to introduced species. The Monarch. I was going to skip this one, but then I thought, you know, I could talk about, you know, how to tell the difference between a female and a male. And then we're going to talk about the Viceroy just a little bit later. So clearly the male has what we call a sex patch that actually releases pheromones. And so if he has a dot in the bottom of his in his hind wings, he is a male. One of the things that is different between a monarch and a viceroy is the monarchs will actually hold their wings in a V when they're gliding, but the viceroy will hold its wings out when it's gliding. They also kind of sail in the wind. Now we know that, it's all about the milkweeds when it comes to monarchs, and that you can actually, if you, do a 15 by 15 foot garden of milkweeds, you can rear 150 adults. But, just so you know that it's natural for every year for half of the monarchs to be killed off by the winter. I also love looking at the different life cycles. This is a cute picture of an egg. A lot of us don't see the eggs, except if you're one of our master gardeners that like rearing their own monarchs, and you can actually pick out those eggs right away. We know that the monarch has this yellow, black, white, and has these black protrusions. But recent research actually came out, and I just wrote an article on it, and it was from the Natural History Survey, Illinois Natural History Survey, and what they said was it wasn't the lack of milkweed that was causing the monarch decline, that the monarchs were actually building up their populations here in Illinois, that there was still enough milkweed left in the gardens and left in the natural areas. But actually, the issue was that the monarchs weren't making it down to their winter habitat. And one of the reasons was because there's not enough floral resources for their kind of highway to the south. So we don't have enough asters, or we don't have enough goldenrods and all these fall blooming plants that we actually need to help them on their journey. And we think about their journey, how they fly all the way south to Mexico or Southern California, and they don't have what they need because we have a barren landscape. So and I'll talk about this at the State Master Gardener Conference, where we're actually promoting people to plant more fall bloomers for the monarchs. Not that we don't want you to plant milkweed, but we want you to also plant the fall bloomers. Here's the Viceroy, and again, the way you tell it's a monarch look-alike. It's a little bit smaller, but the way you tell is that black line that crosses the bottom. A lot of people think they see a monarch when they actually see a Viceroy. So again, the difference between the way they fly and this black line across the bottom. Monarchs and Viceroy are labeled under this Müllerian mimicry. They think that, Viceroys are mimicking monarchs because monarchs are poisonous because they eat the milkweed. But in actuality, Viceroys, their caterpillars eat willow. And willow can cause a bitter taste. So they're both distasteful. Even if a bird tried to eat a Viceroy, it still would taste bad, just like the monarch. So maybe they just share common predators, but they have come to mimic each other's warning signals. Even though they're both still, they can both warn because they both taste really bad to birds. Even at rest, you see that the Viceroy has this black line across the bottom of its wings. And that tells you right away that this is not a monarch. Again, I love the Viceroy because the caterpillars kind of look gross and like poop. And here you see it building its hibernaculum on a willow branch. Now, this one, kind of this olive color, it would be hard to necessarily sometimes tell the difference between this and red spotted purple if you have a willow, because they both kind of look like poop and olive green and build a hibernaculum. But you have one or the other. Cabbage butterfly. Oh, I love the way cabbage butterflies dance around in your garden. how pretty they are. They flutter around, yet they are the most detested butterfly of all gardeners because we know they lay their eggs on our brassica family. If you have any kind of broccoli, cabbage, if you ever tried to grow that, even lettuces and kales and spinaches, you've ran into the caterpillars of these butterflies. They are sexually dimorphic. This is a female right here because males only have 1 dot per wing and females have 2 dots per wing. I always like showing the pictures of this because a lot of people, if you look at that top caterpillar, now that is the larva of this cabbage butterfly. Now a lot of people think these bottom ones are actually the larva of a cabbage butterfly too, but that's not so. They're actually called a zebra caterpillar. So, you know, you can't just totally blame the cabbage white butterflies, but you know, our local foods and small farm educators gives his kids tennis rackets and has them go after the butterflies. Painful to watch, but you kind of understand. Now, it's important that when you do have an outbreak of cabbage butterfly, that you actually clean it up because they are overwintering as pupa. So you want to you know, clean up all that debris and maybe even disc the soil because that's where they're pupating for next year. Little yellow, we've all seen the little yellow butterflies, but never knew exactly what they were called. Well, aptly named little yellow butterfly. It's about 1 to 1.75 inches. These bright yellow, kind of black smudges everywhere. They all have this brown spot, and then they have these 2 black spots near the base of the body. You see here, you see this one's seasonally dimorphic, which means it looks different from spring to winter. This one, it's a much darker yellow. I know you can't quite see it in these pictures, it's just the difference in the photography. And it has a yellow-pink edge. These guys, their larva feeds on peas, or the legume family. Then we have the little wood satyr. Now this one was really highly populated on the list, and I'd never really heard of it before because, you know, this one primarily likes the woodlands and doesn't always come out when in the gardens, but this one had a high count in prairies. So it's a 1.5 inches. They are this kind of muted brown with these 2 yellow-black dots rimmed in yellow on each wing. And if you see on the other underside, they also have those black dots rimmed in yellow. And they have these 2 dark lines, striations running down them when their wings are held together and they are at rest. These guys, the larva, eats grasses and sedges. But the adults, they like tree sap, carrion, dung, rotting fruit. However, they do kind of dance around from plant to plant in the way they move through the gardens. And then, after I learned that there's a high population of silver-spotted skipper in my research, I think every skipper I saw was a silver-spotted skipper, and I found them everywhere on blooming plants. So it's primarily brown. It has these orangish patches. On the underneath, you have that bright white silver patch. Again, you see they kind of they're smaller than normal butterflies. They have kind of a blockier head than normal butterflies, and then again you see that hook on the end. Guaranteed, if you go out and look in your flowers and there's butterflies flying around, you'll probably see a silver-spotted skipper, which is why he had to be added to the list today. Up until a couple of years ago, I actually used Butterflies of Illinois field guide, Butterflies of Indiana field guide, until the Prairie Research Institute with Mike Jeffers and Sue Post put out this Butterflies of Illinois, and it's a really, really good book. I know, you're like, hold on, Butterfly, wait until I can identify you. They do have the pages marked at the very end with the colors. It's available at extension offices or online. It's an amazing book to have. I really read this book from front to back, preparing for this research, and thought they gave a lot of great identification techniques. These are the other books that I went through in my research. The Peterson guides and the Kaufman guides are really great. They're not, as focused to Illinois, but they can be, rather easy to use. Milkweed, monarchs, and more. What I love about this book is that it shows that milkweeds actually, host a plethora of insects. Monarchs are kind of our poster child for, insect conservation, but really conserving milkweed helps numerous insects. And then this, the life cycles of butterflies. I actually, when I do Master Gardener training, I always take this book with me. It's a children's book. But what's so wonderful about it is that it shows the egg, the larva through the different molts. It shows the pupa and then the adult. And it's just a really great book. I've actually identified caterpillars by this book. Because once people find out you like butterflies, then you can identify everything, even eggs, which I can't. So don't send me any pictures of butterfly eggs unless it's in this book. And then the Illinois Butterfly Monitoring Network, great resource for me. I definitely could not have done this PowerPoint without help from other photographers. I used the Bug Guide. University of Florida has a great entomology program. Illinois Wildflowers is one of the best websites that I think Illinois has for, gardeners and native plants. It's all the native plants. Then underneath the particular native plants, he'll talk about pollinator associations. Alex Wild actually did ant studies here at the University of Illinois, and then he moved to University of Texas. And if you see a bee picture in advertising, it's probably his. He's a wonderful photographer. And then Deanna Frauchi, she is a McLean County master naturalist and nature photographer here in Bloomington, who just has an eye for butterflies. She also is a hummingbird guru. So I used a lot of her images. And then I can't not promote myself. I have a blog called Flowers, Fruits, and Frass. If we don't remember, frass is insect poop, because sometimes I can actually identify the insects by the poop they make. What a great talent to have. I'm going to put that on my resume. And then I have a picture that I love. This is called an Aphid Lion, and it's eating aphids in a greenhouse that I used to work at. And what the adult of this Aphid Lion is a green lacewing. And you see green lacewings pollinating flowers all the time. If you see a green lacewing in your garden, most likely you have their larva, and they're actually garden warriors. And then you can like me on Facebook. And with that, here's my contact information. Again, no pictures of butterfly eggs, but any of the others maybe I could perhaps identify. If not, I could find other sources for you. And thank you very much for learning about butterfly identification today. For past recordings of the Four Seasons Gardening Series, you can go to YouTube. This is a really great way to get continued education for master gardeners from the comfort of your own home. Anybody have a question? It was so thorough, nobody has questions. Awesome.